On the pharma sector to find a coronavirus vaccine. It's a race for recognition and big bucks, but also our lives. Who'll get the vaccine first? Will countries only look after their own interests?
Human health is the quintessential global public good. And today we face a global public enemy like no other. In an interconnected world, none of us is safe until all of us are safe.
The virus is a global threat. Global cooperation is key. But if market forces prevail, any vaccine would reach poorest nations last. I'm Ben Fazoulan, welcome. Governments around the world are throwing billions of dollars at pharma firms to be first to develop that elusive coronavirus vaccine. It's great the money's flowing, but what about pooling our resources? We're all facing the same problem, but not everyone's in this together.
Digital conferences for powerful leaders. Billions are collected these days by the EU and by other alliances for a coronavirus vaccine.
7.4 billion euros.
One statement being repeated is that a vaccine should be available for all.
Let's make sure it reaches everyone.
A nice thought, but it poses questions. Who will get the vaccine first? Health workers, including those groups at risk worldwide, according to the WHO, which is focusing on a joint effort. Nobody can force it. It is up to each and every member state to abide by these rules or this vote, and to abide by this mechanism. But it is not clear if this will work, or whether countries will look to secure their own supply first, a kind of vaccination nationalism. My guess really is that both Donald Trump and China might say, at a crucial moment, we're just looking out for our people, to strategically leverage political power. Which is another reason why the EU is massively supporting research. The US, for its part, provides substantial funding. But this also helps secure access. French pharma giant Sanofi recently announced that the US has priority in terms of supply. But it backed down after criticism. The company said, "We are not going to prioritize one country over another," but doubts still remain. It cannot be left to the absolute and exclusive control of companies as to who has access to an important drug and when. Doctors Without Borders welcomes the fact that Germany is pumping money into research, but it's demanding that those who receive public funding must also share knowledge. We want to ramp up production as quickly as possible to meet global demand for all people in the world at prices that everyone can pay. Companies are unlikely to give away their patents. That is, their intellectual property. But it is clear that to supply the world, many producers will be needed, and billions of doses will be required. Peter Liese is therefore calling for production to be ramped up quickly once a vaccine has been found. Companies must submit their patents annually, but we must give other companies the opportunity to produce the vaccine. Then they can charge royalties for it. Even so, at first there probably won't be enough vaccine for everyone, so it will become clear whether distribution is based on solidarity or whether public speeches about global cohesion were simply lip service.
Detlef Gunten is president of the World Health Summit. Good to see you again, sir. As lockdowns ease and cases spike again in many places, just how much is hanging on this vaccine?
Well, of course, we are all waiting for the vaccine, but we'll have to cope with the pandemic without vaccine. The vaccine is still far away. People say end of the year, beginning of the next year would be the earliest. And then not everybody is being vaccinated. So we have to cope with the pandemic now without a vaccine, definitely.
What makes you think world leaders will want to share with other nations, especially at a time of increased nationalism, if this vaccine does come our way?
Well, I think that, especially in the very beginning, the separation of national interests and closing the borders was a catastrophe from my point of view, but also the point of view of many in the population, but I'm sure also in politics and other organizations. Now it's more open and travel is possible again and more collaboration. I've been very heartened and very happy that the German Minister of Health and the French Minister of Health have been to WHO, talked to the Secretary General and discussed multilateral cooperation. So I think we are on a good way. But with this problem we have still ahead of us, I think more collaboration is necessary.
Okay, you mentioned the WHO chief there. Well, let's have a listen in to see what he had to say about a vaccine.
Some of the things we are seeing now is some countries are going into having some mechanisms that favors them. And that may undermine the global access or making this vaccine a global public good. So there should be a real political commitment.
But what sort of commitment? Because once a vaccine comes along, there'll be a mad rush. And politicians and promises don't always go hand in hand, do they?
Well, we do have organizations like the Global Alliance for Vaccination, CP, the Coalition for Epidemiological Preparedness and Innovation. They are putting pressure on governments, on companies that the vaccines which will be available are available to everybody. But of course, we have governments like the United States and others who try to buy up and buy themselves into companies and then control what's going on. But I would imagine, and I'm trustful, that the world opinion will not tolerate that rescuing drugs or vaccines are not available for everybody. There may be a time course, of course, but finally it will have to be distributed worldwide. I fully agree with the Director General of WHO, and all my colleagues in academia and everybody I talk to, they agree on this. So there will be a big pressure, I hope, that this isolated activities will not prevail.
And just briefly, the likelihood of getting this vaccine, you mentioned it's a long way off. How are we going to deal without one for all that time, and what if one never comes?
Well, I mean, we are dealing with COVID-19 now. We do have repurposing of drugs, and there are several trials going on. The recovery trial from the Oxford University and their partners, the Solidarity trial of WHO coordinated international trials. And you have probably heard, and some of the listeners have heard about the chloroquine, with the publication that this was harmful, and now it's back into the game. So there's a lot of activities going on, and I'm sure that the normal treatment of this disease and the increasing experience and exchange of experience will help us to overcome the period until we have the vaccine.
Detlef Gutton, President of the World Health Summit, thank you. And time to put you in the capable hands of one of my workmates, Derek Williams. He's been looking into all the questions you send us on our YouTube channel.
If I've maintained social distance, do I have to change my clothes after coming back home from my short morning walk?
Although we know SARS-CoV-2 can remain on some surfaces for days, clothing in general is viewed by most experts as pretty low risk. The evidence suggests that the virus doesn't remain viable for very long on woven material like textiles. All the guidance I've seen says if you've been outside and kept proper social distance, there's no reason to change your clothes when you return home. However, it's a good idea not to shake your laundry before washing it, because even if the chances that you've picked it up outside are remote, they can't be excluded completely. And if you have, then shaking out your dirty clothes could cause it to become airborne. And make sure to wash your hands after your walk. That's always a sensible precaution.
How common is a cytokine storm in someone who has COVID-19?
When the immune system responds to a pathogen, it begins releasing compounds called cytokines, which cause inflammation and attack infected tissue. In some patients with COVID-19, this curative measure doesn't shut off after the virus is beaten, but instead begins turning on the lungs or other organs, destroying healthy tissue and sort of generally wreaking havoc. If that process spirals out of control, you get what's called a cytokine storm. Now, though I don't think anyone has tried to break it down into percentages, in COVID-19 patients who are critically ill, cytokine storms are viewed as a major contributor to mortality, possibly the biggest contributor.
What's known about the oxygen transport problems caused by the virus in the blood?
One of the symptoms of COVID-19 is a feeling of breathlessness, which can be initiated by a lack of oxygen in the bloodstream. It's a condition known as hypoxia. And some patients sometimes have what's known as silent hypoxia. That's when the oxygen levels in their blood can drop to life-threateningly low levels, but they aren't feeling any respiratory distress. So what's going on there? The truth is we don't really know yet. One possibility is that the virus is altering blood vessel contraction in the lungs and messing up this finely balanced mechanism of gas exchange that happens there. Some experts think that the microclotting that the disease has been proven to cause is at the root of the problem. There are even some hypotheses that silent hypoxia can be caused by effects the virus has on the nervous system. When there's more consensus on the topic, then I'll let you know here.